Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into a collection of 20 news articles curated by Toronto real estate agent Manoj Atri.
Should be a fascinating look at what's happening in the market right now.
Absolutely. And we're going to focus on what it all means for buyers, sellers, investors, and renters here in the GTA.
A lot to unpack.
Definitely. So let's jump right in with this article from the Walrus. When your landlord is a billion-dollar corporation.
This one really dives into a pretty significant shift in the Canadian rental market.
Yeah, the growing influence of big corporations, especially these things called REITs, real estate investment trusts.
Right, and the article explores what that means for tenants and for the overall housing market.
It starts with this story about a guy named Syed Noman Ali, a tenant in Calgary. Avenue Living REIT bought his building, and his rent skyrocketed,
Went from $4,425 to $2,450 a month, plus all these new fees for parking and security.
which he says were either already included or not even being provided. It's a pretty stark example of how these corporations are prioritizing profits, maybe at the expense of the tenants.
Definitely raises some red flags about this whole idea of the financialization of housing.
Exactly. And the article explains that REITs have this special tax-exempt status in Canada. As long as they distribute most of their taxable income to shareholders, they don't have to pay taxes.
Which kind of incentivizes them to focus on making as much money as possible. That's where you see those aggressive rent hikes and cost-cutting measures that can impact the quality of the rentals.
The article then goes into the tactics some REITs use to squeeze out even more profits. Things like disruptive renovations or even just neglecting maintenance to push tenants out so they can raise rents for new occupants.
They even use an example from Scarborough. Kadijial Makasi dealt with years of neglected maintenance, water damage, and all that in a building owned by Golden Equity Properties. Tough situation.
It really highlights the impact these practices have on people's lives. And this is especially relevant here in the GTA, where almost half of all households are renters.
48% to be exact.
So a huge chunk of the population could be affected by these corporate landlord practices. But the article doesn't just lay out the problem, it also explores some potential solutions, like strengthening rent control policies.
Which could help limit those rent increases and give tenants a bit more stability. Of course, some argue that stricter rent control could backfire.
Discourage new rental construction, make the supply shortage even worse.
Exactly. Another solution they propose is tighter regulation of REITs. Maybe limits on rent increases or making them meet certain standards for property maintenance.
But there's always the concern that too much regulation could make investing in rental housing less appealing, which again could hurt the supply,
It's a complex issue.
for sure. The article also mentions the need for more transparency when it comes to property ownership. Make it easier to track what these corporate landlords are doing and hold them accountable.
Makes sense, but implementing that kind of transparency would be a big undertaking.
Definitely. The article wraps up by highlighting the work of groups like Acorn, who are advocating for tenants' rights and pushing for these reforms.
Really important work trying to level the playing field between corporate landlords and tenants.
Absolutely. This deep dive into when your landlord is a billion-dollar corporation paints a pretty concerning picture of what's happening in the rental market. This trend of REITs and their profit-driven strategies raises a lot of questions about affordability, tenant rights, and the future of housing in the GTA.
Definitely a complex issue, and there's no easy fix. It's going to require a lot of discussion and some creative policy solutions if we want to create a fairer and more sustainable housing market.
Now let's move on to another big issue that could have a major impact on homeowners in the GTA, the looming mortgage renewal cliff.
Oh, this is a big one. This article from the Burlington Gazette. CMHC reports 2 million mortgages to hit renewal cliff in 2025 and 2026 is pretty alarming for a lot of homeowners.
Yeah, the whole premise is that a huge number of mortgages are about to come up for renewal, and those homeowners are going to be hit with much higher interest rates.
2 million mortgages, they say. And it could have a domino effect on the entire economy.
Reduced consumer spending, tougher affordability for renters, even potential drops in condo prices.
The CMHC is predicting a $15 billion hit to the Canadian economy because of this.
Which is a pretty stark contrast to what TD Bank is saying. They're focusing on the potential savings for people who are renewing from those super high rates we saw earlier this year.
Interesting how different analysts can have such different takes on the same issue.
It really highlights the uncertainty in economic forecasting, right?
Mhm.
We have to consider all the angles. But the article does make a compelling case that the GTA, with its high debt levels and overheated housing market, could be especially vulnerable.
Makes sense. If people are already stretched thin, those higher mortgage payments could really push them over the edge.
The article even gives this example. Imagine your $500,000 mortgage jumping by $950 each month when you renew. That's a huge increase. Yeah.
Definitely a wake-up call for homeowners. Now's the time to start planning, exploring refinancing options, maybe even thinking about downsizing.
Being proactive is key. And it's a good reminder that things can change quickly in the real estate market. We need to stay informed and be prepared to adapt.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears a bit. This next article is a reminder that even in a place like Thunder Bay, legal issues can pop up in real estate.
Yeah, this article from TBNewsWatch.com, former tenant must pay landlord nearly $6,000 for damages, is a case in point. A tenant caused a lot of damage, mostly from pets, and the landlord had to take them to court.
Really emphasizes the importance of clear documentation and good communication between landlords and tenants.
The article goes into detail about the damage, scratched floors, chewed up baseboards, the whole 9 yards. The landlord had photos and everything, which really helped their case.
Good reminder for landlords to do those thorough inspections and keep detailed records.
And for tenants, to be aware of their responsibilities, especially when it comes to pets.
Right, and to communicate any issues with their landlords promptly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This case might be in Thunder Bay, but the lessons apply to anyone involved in the rental market, whether you're in the GTA or anywhere else.
For sure. Clear expectations and a good understanding of everyone's rights and responsibilities can go a long way in preventing these kinds of disputes.
Now, let's head back to the GTA and look at some potentially positive news for the market. This article from Chirub, GTA home sales up substantially in November. Chirub suggests we might be seeing a rebound on the horizon.
Yeah, this one points to a 40.1% jump in home sales compared to last November. Definitely a sign of renewed buyer confidence.
The TRIB president even said that we could see an accelerating market recovery in 2025, especially for those buyers who have been sitting on the sidelines waiting for prices to drop.
Interesting. The report also talks about the need to tackle the backlog of cases at the Landlord and Tenant Board.
Yeah, they're calling for reforms to create a fairer system for both landlords and tenants.
Which makes sense. A healthy rental market is a crucial part of a healthy housing ecosystem.
The article also delves into price trends, noting a slower decline in the MLS Home Price Index and a slight increase in the average selling price.
Looks like things might be stabilizing, though affordability is still a major issue, especially for first-time buyers.
That's always the challenge in the GTA, isn't it? Now, speaking of affordability, let's look at an article that highlights just how tough it is for many Canadians to make ends meet when it comes to housing.
This one's from CTV News. Mortgages over $1,700 aren't comfortably affordable for most Canadians surveyed. The numbers are pretty sobering.
Yeah, they found that 67% of Canadians can't handle a monthly mortgage payment over $749, and the average payment in Canada is currently over $1,800.
That gap is pretty significant, and it's not just low-income earners who are struggling.
Exactly. They found that even people making over $100,000 a year are feeling the pinch. Almost half of them said they'd have trouble with those higher mortgage payments.
They use Halifax as an example. The average starter home there is over $505,000, which means a monthly mortgage payment of about $2,600.
But people in Halifax said they could only comfortably afford $1,140. That's a huge difference.
And of course, in Toronto, the average starter home price is way higher, which makes the affordability gap even bigger.
It's a good reminder that even though we might be seeing some positive trends in the market, affordability remains a massive hurdle for a lot of people.
Absolutely. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach to solve this, from increasing housing supply to finding ways to make home ownership more accessible for a wider range of people.
Now let's delve into a story that highlights the potential pitfalls of being a landlord.
This one's a real eye-opener. It's from money.ca. Ontario landlord's tenants have not paid rent for more than 16 months, leaving him on the hook for $28,000 plus legal fees. Now an eviction order is frozen. Is the system failing landlords?
It's about a landlord in Windsor who's been dealing with non-paying tenants for over a year and a half. They owe him over $28,000 in rent, plus legal fees. And to make matters worse, the eviction order he finally got was frozen.
Really highlights the challenges landlords can face, and it raises questions about how effective the landlord and tenant board system really is.
The article talks about the importance of a solid lease agreement that clearly lays out the rules, the payment schedule, and the process for handling non-payment.
Definitely crucial. And it also emphasizes the need for landlords to understand their legal options and seek advice when necessary.
It's a reminder that being a landlord isn't always easy, and there are definitely risks involved.
For sure. Now let's look at how the recent Bank of Canada interest rate cut is impacting the real estate market.
This article breaks down how that 0.5% cut is benefiting different groups, from first-time buyers to homeowners renewing their mortgages, and even investors.
Those lower rates are making borrowing more affordable, which could really stimulate demand, especially in the GTA, where affordability has been such a huge issue.
The article specifically encourages first-time buyers to consider jumping into the market now while conditions are favorable.
Makes sense. Lower rates mean lower monthly payments, which could make homeownership more attainable for a lot of people.
The article also talks about the potential benefits for homeowners who are up for renewal. Lower rates could mean a decrease in their monthly payments, freeing up some cash flow.
And if you have a fixed-rate mortgage, you might want to explore refinancing options to take advantage of those lower rates.
It's always a good idea to review your mortgage strategy and see what makes the most sense for your situation.
Exactly. The article then shifts to investors, highlighting the potential opportunities created by the rate cuts.
Lower rates make it easier to finance new acquisitions, and as property values potentially rise, those investments could look even more attractive.
They also point to the rental market as a potential area of growth. As demand increases, landlords might be able to charge higher rents.
But they also mention the upcoming flipping tax, which could complicate things for those looking to make a quick profit.
It's all about timing and strategy when it comes to real estate investing.
For sure. Now let's take a look at an article that brings us back to the unique dynamics of the Toronto market. This one's about a fire-damaged house that's listed for $1 million.
Oh, this one's interesting. It really gets into the whole concept of land value and what makes a property worth something, even when the house itself is basically gone.
The article talks about the property's history, the fact that it's been on and off the market for several years and had multiple price reductions before the fire even happened.
So it was already facing some challenges.
Exactly. And now it's listed for land value only, which means the structure is a write-off.
The article dives into the location, noting that it's in the Yorkdale and Glen Park area, which has actually seen a 13% drop in property values recently.
So that adds another layer of complexity for potential investors.
For sure. They'd have to weigh the costs of demolition and rebuilding against the potential for future appreciation in the area.
It's a good reminder that not every real estate deal is a sure thing. Some require a bit more risk tolerance and a longer-term perspective.
Absolutely. Now, let's shift our focus to a trend that's impacting both cottage country and the GTA, the increasing regulation of short-term rentals.
This article from Cottage Life magazine explores how municipalities are trying to find a balance between supporting the sharing economy and preserving the character of their communities.
It's a tough challenge. On one hand, you have the economic benefits of short-term rentals, and on the other hand, you have residents who are concerned about noise, parking, and the changing feel of their neighborhoods.
The article shares stories from both sides, giving us a glimpse into the complexities of the issue.
And it looks at the different approaches municipalities are taking to regulate these rentals, from licensing fees to zoning restrictions.
But there's no one-size-fits-all solution, and the regulations often vary from region to region, which can be confusing for both property owners and renters.
Definitely. This is something that GTA investors need to be aware of, too. Those regulations can have a big impact on the profitability of short-term rentals in the city.
Now let's wrap up this part of our deep dive with an article that focuses on a specific type of real estate investment that can be quite lucrative: multifamily properties.
This article from Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine breaks down the benefits of investing in duplexes, triplexes, and even larger apartment buildings.
They offer a steady stream of rental income, the potential for appreciation, and even some tax advantages.
But it's not as simple as just buying any multifamily property. The article emphasizes the importance of thorough due diligence before making an investment.
That means analyzing the local market, understanding the financial performance of the property, and carefully assessing the building's condition to anticipate any potential maintenance costs.
And working with experienced professionals like real estate agents, property managers, and lawyers can make a huge difference in navigating the sector successfully.
It's all about doing your homework and making smart decisions, right? Now let's move on to an article from HGTV Canada. Real estate agents across Canada share their 2025 predictions. They've gathered insights from leading agents across the country, giving us a sneak peek into what they think the market's going to do next year.
Always interesting to hear what those on the front lines are thinking.
Absolutely. And we're going to zero in on the predictions for the Toronto market specifically, hearing from agents like Ming Lim, Matthew Lee, and Hugh Cooper.
Some big names in the industry. Should be insightful.
The article starts with a national overview, and it looks like the Canadian Real Estate Association, or CREA, is forecasting a rebound in 2025. They're predicting a 6.6% increase in home sales and a 4.4% bump in the national average home price.
Sounds like they're expecting the market to pick up steam, driven by those declining interest rates and a resurgence in buyer demand.
Exactly. They're saying it'll be a gradual recovery with a more pronounced rebound in the second quarter of 2025. But they also emphasize that affordability is going to play a key role in how quickly things bounce back.
Makes sense. That's been the biggest hurdle for a lot of people, especially first-time buyers.
The article also mentions a Ledger survey commissioned by RE/MAX Canada. Apparently, 49% of those surveyed believe that homeownership is still attainable, and 36% are optimistic about the market improving in 2025.
It's encouraging to see that despite all the challenges, there's still a good amount of optimism out there.
Definitely. And RE/MAX is also predicting a 5% increase in the national average home price next year. They're saying that first-time home buyers are going to be a major force driving that resurgence.
That's a good sign. Shows that younger generations are still eager to get into the market, and maybe the conditions are finally becoming more favorable for them.
Now, let's hear what those Toronto agents have to say. First up, Ming Lim from Volition Properties. He's predicting a super busy spring market in 2025 for Toronto.
Buckle up, everyone.
He's attributing that to two main factors, those easing interest rates we've been talking about, and a lot of pent-up demand from buyers who have been waiting on the sidelines. He's saying that starter homes priced under $1.5 million are going to be the hottest commodity. Buyers in that segment could be facing a lot of competition, even bidding wars.
That makes sense. As affordability improves, that lower end of the market tends to heat up first.
Exactly. We could see a lot of activity and potentially even some price increases in that segment. Ming's also predicting a more gradual recovery for mid-tier homes, those priced between $1.5 and $2.5 million. And the luxury market, homes over $2.5 million, will probably stay a bit sluggish for a while longer.
Again, that aligns with the idea that affordability is driving a lot of these trends.
Right. Now, when it comes to the condo market, Ming's not quite as optimistic. He's saying there are still some challenges there. Those low absorption rates, meaning condos aren't selling as quickly as they're being listed, are putting downward pressure on resale prices.
And with all those new condo units expected to be completed in 2025, that inventory is only going to grow.
Exactly. He doesn't see the new condo sales market rebounding anytime soon either. He's saying sales are way down from the 10-year average.
But there could be a silver lining for first-time buyers. That oversupply of condos could create some opportunities to enter the market at a more affordable price.
Maybe even have a bit more negotiating power. Always a good thing. Now, Volition Properties works a lot with real estate investors, and Ming had some interesting insights about the multifamily investment property market. He's predicting that spring 2025 is going to be a prime time for investors.
Historically, the investment market tends to follow the trends in the single-family home sector.
Right. So as those home prices start climbing, multifamily properties are likely to follow suit.
Makes sense.
Ming's also pointing to lower HELC rates, those home equity lines of credit, as another factor driving demand.
Which gives investors more flexibility to finance those new acquisitions.
And with mortgage rates declining, the potential for positive cash flow from rental properties becomes even more attractive.
Definitely something to consider for those looking to build their portfolio.
Ming's seeing a lot of activity among experienced investors who are trying to find those great deals before the market really takes off.
Smart strategy.
He expects that trend to continue throughout 2025. Now, let's hear what Matthew Lee, the founder and managing partner of Volition Properties, has to say about first-time buyers in Toronto.
Let's see what he's got.
He's saying it's going to be tough for those who want more than just a tiny condo.
The space issue.
Yeah, developers have been shrinking those unit sizes, making them less practical for a lot of people, especially those thinking about starting a family.
Those micro condos might work for some, but they're not ideal for everyone.
Right. And Matthew's pointing out that a lot of those small units, which investors snapped up to rent out to young professionals, are now struggling to sell. They're just not meeting the needs of buyers who want more space and long-term value.
Interesting point.
But here's where Matthew gets really interesting. He's saying that duplexes and triplexes are becoming a more compelling alternative for first-time buyers in Toronto.
Oh, that's a different angle.
And it all comes down to those recent changes in CMHC mortgage rules. These changes, which just went into effect on December 15th, allow first-time buyers to put down less than 20% on homes up to $1.5 million.
So that opens up some possibilities.
Exactly. And they can also take advantage of 30-year amortizations, which helps lower those monthly payments.
That's a big shift.
It basically levels the playing field, making those small multifamily properties in downtown Toronto more comparable to condos when it comes to the down payment and carrying costs.
I see where he's going with this.
And the beauty of it is, if you live in one unit and rent out the others, you can offset a huge chunk of your mortgage payments.
Essentially, your tenants are helping you build equity.
Exactly. Matthew even gives an example. A $600,000 condo versus a $1.3 million tribe, $100. But that's after you factor in the rental income from the other two units.
Makes a strong case for considering that multifamily option.
Instead of starting with a small condo, you could get more space, generate rental income, and potentially see better appreciation.
Definitely a different way of thinking about homeownership, especially for first-time buyers.
And it can be a great way to dip your toes into real estate investing. Now, we're going to head out west to Winnipeg for a moment. Randy Bettens from Randy Bettens Personal Real Estate Corporation is sharing his predictions for the prairies.
Let's see what he has to say.
He's saying that the market in that region has stayed pretty strong throughout 2024 and expects that to continue into 2025.
Steady as she goes.
Randy's especially optimistic about the potential for further interest rate reductions by the Bank of Canada,
Which, as we've seen, can have a big impact on the market.
He's saying those cuts will almost certainly fuel an increase in demand, which could lead to higher prices.
Sounds familiar.
He's advising first-time buyers to get into the market as early as possible in the spring of 2025 to avoid those potential bidding wars that might happen later in the year.
Good advice. Get ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And he also suggests that first-time buyers connect with a mortgage expert to get the best rates and solid financial advice.
Always a good idea, especially for those navigating the market for the first time.
Now, Randy also has some tips for sellers. He's encouraging those who are thinking about selling to start prepping their homes now.
Get a head start on those renovations and staging.
Exactly. Taking the time to declutter, make repairs, and even stage your home can make a big difference. Randy even suggests hiring a professional staging company.
It's all about presentation.
He says that investing in the saleability of your home can lead to a greater return on your investment.
Makes sense.
Okay, next up, we have April DeYoung, a senior real estate specialist at Royal LePage Benchmark in Calgary.
Let's hear what she has to say about the Calgary market.
She starts by highlighting Calgary's strong economic fundamentals. She mentions that Calgary has seen the biggest increase in active businesses among Canadian cities, which shows how resilient its economy is.
That's a good sign. A strong economy usually translates into a healthy real estate market.
Exactly. She's also pointing to Alberta's overall economic strength, driven by things like increased access to energy markets, steady population growth, and the emergence of new industries like tech, hydrogen, and aviation.
Sounds like Alberta is booming.
April also mentions some big projects happening in Calgary that are adding to its appeal. Things like the Calgary Event Center, a $1.22 billion initiative, and over $2.5 billion in residential investments that are set to be completed by 2026.
Those kinds of investments can really transform a city and make it even more attractive to live in.
For sure. Now, looking ahead to 2025, April's optimistic about the prospects for first-time home buyers in Calgary.
That's good news.
She says Calgary is still a more affordable option compared to cities like Toronto and Vancouver.
Which is a big draw for a lot of people.
Exactly. She expects those supply imbalances in Calgary's housing market to ease over time as the construction industry continues to grow.
More options for buyers, less competition.
Right. And she's already seeing a lot of activity in Calgary's mid-range market, which she defines as homes priced between $550,000 and $700,000.
So that sweet spot for a lot of buyers.
She's attributing that to the recent interest rate reductions and the increase in available inventory.
Buyers responding to those favorable market conditions.
April's predicting a potentially even stronger spring market in 2025. She thinks buyers might want to get into the market sooner rather than later, and even consider variable rate mortgages.
Variable rates can be a good option in a declining interest rate environment.
Exactly. And April really highlights Calgary's unique appeal. She says the city offers a combination of economic opportunity, a high quality of life, and relative affordability, which makes it a really desirable place to live and invest.
Sounds like a winning combination.
Now, last but not least, we have some predictions from two big names in the Vancouver market. Kit Matkaluk and Hugh Cooper from Kit plus Coop at the agency Vancouver. They're forecasting a bit of a mixed bag for Vancouver in 2025.
Let's hear what they have to say.
They're acknowledging the impact of those declining interest rates and cooling inflation, but they think there might be a short-term lull for sellers over the next few months as buyers adjust to the changing landscape.
A bit of a wait-and-see approach.
But they're not pessimistic. In fact, they're predicting a resurgence in activity starting in the second quarter of 2025, with the market becoming very active as sentiment and optimism return.
The classic real estate cycle, a period of adjustment followed by a period of growth.
Exactly. Kit and Hugh are saying that by the end of 2025, demand could actually exceed supply in Vancouver, leading to those familiar trends of rising prices, multiple offers, and decreasing affordability.
So, a potential shift back to a seller's market.
They're specifically recommending that first-time buyers look into pre-sale properties, those that are slated to be completed in the next year or two.
That way, they can lock in a price now and potentially benefit from any appreciation that happens as the market recovers.
Makes sense. And for investors, Kit and Hugh believe that the luxury condo market in Vancouver is likely to outperform other sectors, especially as international buyers return.
High-end properties, prime locations, those always seem to hold their value.
Exactly. They're recommending that investors focus on properties in those prime locations, close to amenities and transportation hubs.
It's all about understanding the nuances of the market and knowing where to put your money.
Now let's switch gears and look at an article from CTV News that focuses on the recent surge in Toronto home sales. They're attributing this jump to that interest rate cut back in October, which seems to have been a real turning point, drawing buyers back into the market.
And the numbers back that up. The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board reported a 40.1% year-over-year increase in home sales in November.
That's huge. And it's not just Toronto. Vancouver also saw a significant increase, with a 28.1% jump in November. Seems like those rate cuts are having a positive impact across major Canadian cities.
Stimulating activity, maybe even moving us toward a more balanced market.
The article talks about how sales have been rising nationally in recent months as the Bank of Canada has steadily lowered its key interest rate. It was at 5% earlier this year, and now it's down to 3.75%.
Those lower borrowing costs are definitely enticing buyers who are sitting on the fence.
And the article mentions that the central bank is expected to cut rates again at its next meeting on December 11th. This would be the 5th consecutive cut.
Wow, so it looks like this trend of declining interest rates is likely to continue, which could further boost the housing market.
The article breaks down the sales increases by property type, and it's interesting to see how different segments are performing. Townhouses are leading the pack with a 46% increase compared to last year, followed by detached homes at 43.9%, and then condos at 36.3%.
So it seems like buyers are gravitating towards those larger properties.
Maybe a sign that people are looking for more space after those years of pandemic living.
Makes sense.
But while townhouses and detached homes are seeing price increases, the condo market hasn't experienced the same growth.
The article suggests that's because there are so many options available for condo buyers, giving them more room to negotiate and potentially pushing prices down a bit.
So maybe a more buyer-friendly market in the condo sector right now?
Could be. Now, the article does include a note of caution from some economists. They're worried about those affordability challenges we've been discussing, especially in Toronto, and they're concerned about how a weakening labor market could impact the housing market's recovery.
Those are valid concerns. We have to remember that the economy is always in flux, and things can change quickly.
They're especially worried about potential mortgage renewal difficulties for those who locked in at higher rates earlier this year, and they're concerned about the possibility of more people listing their homes if they lose their jobs.
Those factors could definitely put a damper on the market's recovery. Okay, now for an article from Better Dwelling that dives into a rather interesting phenomenon. Rising Toronto real estate prices despite those record-high inventory levels we've been talking about.
That does seem counterintuitive. Usually more inventory means more competition for sellers, which can lead to lower prices.
Right. But in this case, both sales and prices went up in November, even though there's a ton of inventory on the market.
They're saying that it's probably due to a combination of factors: pent-up buyer demand, that surge in activity we've been seeing, and maybe even a bit of FOMO, that fear of missing out, driving people to make offers quickly.
Interesting. This was the first time since March that prices went up, so it makes you wonder if this is the start of a sustained recovery or just a temporary blip.
They're saying that even with this recent increase in sales, the market still hasn't fully bounced back to pre-pandemic levels, especially when you consider population growth.
So it could go either way. We need to see what happens over the next few months to get a clearer picture. They also highlight how unusual it is to see such strong inventory levels going into the winter.
November actually saw the highest level of inventory in at least a decade, with a 30% increase compared to last year.
So buyers definitely have a lot of options to choose from, which gives them some leverage, even with prices ticking upward.
It's a good reminder that the market can be unpredictable, and it's important to stay informed and be prepared for potential shifts.
Now let's look at a forecast from Royal LePage that gives us a glimpse into what they think will happen in the GTA housing market in 2025. This article from CB24 summarizes their predictions.
Let's see what they have in store for us.
Royal LePage is forecasting a 5% year-over-year increase in the average price of a home in the GCA by the fourth quarter of 2025. That would put the average price at $1,225,770.
A pretty significant jump.
They're also predicting a 7% increase in the median price of a single-family detached property, which would bring it to $1,523,466 by the fourth quarter of 2025.
So detached homes still reigning supreme.
Right. But they have a different outlook for the condo market in the GTA. They're predicting a 1% price decline year over year by the fourth quarter of 2025.
Interesting. Going against the grain there.
They're attributing that to the oversupply of condos on the market. With thousands of new units expected to be completed next year, that inventory is going to keep growing, which could push prices down.
Could be a good opportunity for first-time buyers looking to get into the condo market.
The article quotes Sean Ziegelstein, a Royal LePage broker, who says that Toronto's condo market, especially downtown, is the softest it's been in recent history.
He thinks that combination of easing interest rates, increased inventory, and new lending policies is creating a unique opportunity for first-time buyers to get their foot in the door.
Now, for a story that reminds us that real estate can be full of surprises. This article from BlogTO talks about a Toronto house that was destroyed by fire and is now listed for, wait for it, $1 million.
$1 million for a burnt-out house.
Well, for the land, technically. This house has been on and off the market since 2017, and it's had quite a few price adjustments along the way.
So it's had a bit of a bumpy ride.
It was initially listed for $1,499,000. Then at one point, it was down to $799,900. But now, after the fire, it's back on the market for $949,900.
The price went up after the fire. That's unusual.
The listing explicitly states that it's being sold for land value only.
So the house itself is basically a write-off?
Yeah, the article describes it as a burnt-out ruin. Anyone who buys it would have to factor in the cost of demolition and rebuilding, which can be substantial.
Especially in Toronto.
And to add another layer of complexity, it's located in the Yorkdale and Glen Park area, which has seen a 13% drop in property values over the past year.
So there is that risk of further price declines in the area.
It really highlights the importance of understanding the local market conditions and doing your due diligence before making any investment. Now, let's shift gears and look at a topic that's relevant to both cottage country and the GTA, the growing regulation of short-term rentals.
This has become a hot-button issue in a lot of places.
This article from Cottage Life magazine explores how municipalities are trying to manage the rise of platforms like Airbnb and VRBO and the impact those rentals are having on their communities.
It's a tough balancing act.
On the one hand, short-term rentals can bring in some much-needed revenue for property owners and boost the local economy.
And they can provide travelers with unique and affordable accommodation options.
But, on the other hand, there are concerns about the impact on residents, things like increased noise, parking problems, and a sense that their neighborhoods are changing.
It's a valid concern.
The article shares perspectives from both sides, giving us a sense of the complexities involved.
And it looks at the different approaches municipalities are taking to regulate these rentals, everything from licensing fees to zoning restrictions that limit or even ban them in certain areas.
It's a patchwork of regulations, which can be confusing for both property owners and renters. And the article questions whether these regulations are actually effective in addressing the concerns of residents.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
And it's something that GTA investors need to be aware of too. Those regulations can have a big impact on the profitability of short-term rentals in the city.
Absolutely.
Now let's wrap up this part of our deep dive with an article that focuses on a type of real estate investment that can be very appealing to those looking for steady income and long-term growth: multifamily properties.
Duplexes, triplexes, apartment buildings, those are all great options for investors.
This article from Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine explores the benefits of this sector, highlighting the potential for consistent cash flow from rental income, appreciation in property values, and even some tax advantages.
Sounds like a winning combination.
But as with any investment, there are risks involved, and the article emphasizes the importance of thorough due diligence before making any decisions.
Absolutely. You have to know what you're getting into.
That means analyzing the local market, understanding the financials of the property, and carefully assessing the building's condition to anticipate any potential maintenance costs.
And it's always a good idea to work with experienced professionals who can guide you through the process.
And it's always a good idea to have those experts in your corner. Now let's shift gears and talk about another potential opportunity for investors: flipping properties. But with the new flipping tax set to be implemented in 2025, this strategy might need a little tweaking.
Yeah, that new tax is definitely going to change the game for flippers. It's going to make those quick flips a lot less profitable.
This article from Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine explores how investors can adapt to this new landscape and still find success in the flipping market.
It emphasizes the importance of a longer-term strategy. Instead of those quick cosmetic flips, investors are going to need to think about more substantial renovations that add real value to the property.
Exactly. It's about focusing on those improvements that will appeal to buyers who are looking for a move-in ready home.
And it might mean holding on to the property for a bit longer to ride out any market fluctuations and maximize those returns.
The article also talks about the importance of carefully selecting the right property to flip. Location is always key, and it's even more important now with this new tax.
You want to make sure you're choosing a property in a desirable neighborhood with strong growth potential. That way, even with the added tax, you can still come out ahead.
The article also highlights the need for a solid understanding of the renovation process, budgeting, and timelines.
Flipping is a complex business, and with this new tax, it's even more important to have a well-thought-out plan and a good team of professionals to help you execute it.
Couldn't agree more. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I wanted to touch on one more article that really resonated with me. It's from the Globe and Mail, and it talks about the emotional side of real estate.
Oh yeah, buying or selling a home can be a really emotional experience.
Absolutely. The article explores the different emotions people go through during the process, from the excitement of finding the perfect place to the stress of negotiations and the bittersweet feeling of moving on.
It's a roller coaster ride, for sure.
The article emphasizes the importance of acknowledging those emotions and finding ways to manage them effectively. Whether you're working with a real estate agent, a therapist, or just leaning on friends and family, it's important to have a support system in place.
I think sometimes people underestimate the emotional toll that buying or selling a home can take.
Definitely. And the article also talks about the importance of setting realistic expectations and being patient throughout the process.
Especially in a market like Toronto, where things can move quickly and competition can be fierce.
Right. It's a good reminder that real estate is more than just bricks and mortar. It's about people, their lives, and their dreams.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. This deep dive into these 20 real estate articles has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground, from the impact of interest rates and government policies to the challenges and opportunities facing different segments of the market, and even the emotional aspects of buying and selling a home.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners have found it valuable.
The key takeaway, as always, is that knowledge is power. The more you understand about the real estate market, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions that align with your goals.
Absolutely. Whether you're a seasoned investor, a first-time buyer, or just someone who's curious about the world of real estate, we encourage you to stay informed, stay curious, and never stop learning.
This market is constantly evolving, and there's always something new to discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insights and analysis of the topics that matter most to you.
Until then, happy investing, happy home hunting, and happy renting.